The blood-stained dirt beneath Olivia Brewer's feet kicked up in small clouds as she ran, her swollen belly making each desperate stride more laborious than the last. The vast expanse of wheat fields stretched before her, golden under the harsh Texas sun of 1875, offering both exposure and escape. Behind her lay Thornwood Ranch, and the man who had made her life a living hell for the past year, her husband, Edward Thornwood. "Don't look back," she whispered to herself, one hand clutching the small bag containing all she could grab, the other protectively cradling her 7-month pregnant belly. "Just keep moving." The late afternoon sun beat down relentlessly as Olivia pushed through the pain. Her breathing came in ragged gasps, her chestnut hair falling loose from its pins. She had to reach Laredo by nightfall. There, she hoped to find passage on a stagecoach heading north, away from the Texas borderlands that had become her prison. A sharp pain shot through her abdomen, causing her to stumble. Olivia caught herself, fear rising in her throat. It was too early for the baby. Too early and too dangerous out here alone. "Please, little one," she murmured. "Just a little longer." The distinctive sound of hoofbeats in the distance made her heart freeze. Edward had discovered her absence sooner than she'd hoped. Panic surged through her as she searched frantically for somewhere to hide, but the wheat field offered little cover. With no choice but to continue, she forced her tired legs to move faster, ignoring the protests of her body. The hoofbeats grew louder, closer. She couldn't outrun a horse, especially not in her condition. Tears streamed down her dirt-streaked face as she realized her desperate bid for freedom might end before it truly began. "Hey there," a deep voice called out, different from her husband's cruel tone. "Miss, are you all right?" Olivia turned, ready to fight or plead, whatever it took to protect herself and her unborn child. The man approaching on horseback wasn't Edward. This stranger sat tall in the saddle of a magnificent chestnut mare, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the setting sun. A worn Stetson shaded his eyes, and his tan duster billowed slightly in the evening breeze. "Stay back," she warned, her voice breaking with fear and exhaustion. The rider slowed his horse, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I don't aim to hurt you, madam. You look like you could use some help." As he came closer, Olivia could see his face clearly, kind blue eyes set in a sun-weathered face, a strong jaw covered in stubble, and an expression of genuine concern rather than threat. "Name's Benjamin Blackwell," he said, keeping a respectful distance. "I've got a ranch about 3 miles west. Couldn't help but notice you running through my neighbor's wheat like the devil himself was on your heels." Another contraction seized her, stronger this time. Olivia gasped, doubling over. In an instant, the cowboy had dismounted and was at her side, his strong hand gently supporting her elbow. "You're with child," he observed, concern deepening the lines around his eyes. "Madam, you shouldn't be out here alone. Let me help you." "He'll kill me if he finds me," Olivia whispered, clutching her stomach. "My husband, he'll kill us both." Benjamin's expression hardened momentarily before softening again. "Not while I'm breathing, he won't." With careful movements, he helped her stand straight. "Can you ride? My place isn't far." "You'll be safe there until we figure something out." Olivia hesitated. She had fled one dangerous man. Could she trust this stranger? But as another pain gripped her, she realized she had little choice. The baby was coming too soon, and she needed shelter and help. "Yes," she managed through clenched teeth. "I can ride." With gentle efficiency that spoke of a lifetime working with horses and cattle, Benjamin helped her onto his mare, then swung up behind her. His arms formed a protective circle around her as he took the reins, his chest warm against her back. "I've got you," he said simply, spurring the horse into a gentle canter. "Just hold on." As they rode through the golden wheat toward his ranch, Olivia felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. And though she didn't realize it then, this moment in the fields marked the beginning of a love that would defy all odds in the unforgiving landscape of the Texas frontier. Benjamin's ranch came into view as they crested a small rise, a modest but well-maintained homestead with a sturdy main house, a large barn, and several outbuildings. Cattle grazed in a distant pasture, and smoke curled from the chimney, suggesting warmth and comfort within. "Home, sweet home," Benjamin said as they approached. "Not much, but it's mine, free and clear." As they reached the front yard, an older man emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. His weathered face registered surprise at the sight of Benjamin returning with a woman. "Frank," Benjamin called out, "go fetch Martha from the cookhouse. Tell her we have a lady in need of help." The ranch hand nodded and hurried off while Benjamin carefully dismounted before helping Olivia down from the horse. Her legs nearly buckled beneath her as another contraction seized her body. "Easy now," Benjamin murmured, supporting her weight. "Let's get you inside." The interior of the ranch house was simple but comfortable. A large hearth dominated one wall of the main room, with worn but clean furniture arranged around it. Benjamin led Olivia to a cushioned chair. "Miss." "Forgive me, I don't know your name," he said, crouching before her with concern evident in his eyes. "Olivia," she replied, breathing through the receding pain. "Olivia Brewer, or it was before I married." "Miss Brewer, then. I've sent for Martha, our cook. She's helped birth half the babies in this county. She'll know what to do." He hesitated. "Your husband, Edward Thornwood," Olivia supplied, her voice hardening. "He owns Thornwood Ranch about 10 miles east of here." Recognition flashed in Benjamin's eyes. "I know of him. He doesn't have a reputation for kindness." Olivia's bitter laugh turned into a grimace. "That's one way of putting it." Before Benjamin could respond, the door opened to admit a stout woman with iron-gray hair pulled into a tight bun. Her stern face softened at the sight of Olivia. "Martha, this is Miss Brewer," Benjamin explained, rising to his feet. "She's in a difficult situation and appears to be having her baby early." Martha crossed the room with surprising speed for her bulk. "Land's sakes, child, what are you doing running around in your condition?" Without waiting for an answer, she pressed a practiced hand to Olivia's forehead, then laid gentle fingers on her wrist to check her pulse. "How far along are you, dearie?" she asked. 7 months, I think," Olivia replied, grateful for the woman's no-nonsense approach. Martha nodded. "And the pains, how often?" "Every 15 minutes or so, getting stronger." The cook exchanged a glance with Benjamin. "We need to get her comfortable. The blue bedroom, I think. It's the warmest." She turned back to Olivia. "Can you walk, or shall Mr. Blackwell carry you?" "I can walk," Olivia insisted, though she accepted Benjamin's steadying arm as she rose. The blue bedroom proved to be a cozy space with faded wallpaper and a large 4-poster bed. Martha efficiently turned down the covers while Benjamin hovered awkwardly in the doorway. "I'll leave you ladies to it," he said. "I'll be right outside if you need anything." As he turned to go, Olivia called out, "Mr. Blackwell." When he looked back, she met his gaze steadily. "Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." Something passed between them in that moment, a connection neither could explain but both felt deeply. "Get some rest, Miss Brewer," he said softly. "You're safe here." As the door closed behind him, Olivia allowed Martha to help her out of her dusty traveling dress and into a clean nightgown produced from a chest of drawers. "That belongs to Mr. Blackwell's sister," Martha explained. "She visits from Austin sometimes." Once Olivia was settled in the bed, Martha bustled about preparing the room for what might be a premature birth. When another contraction gripped Olivia, the older woman held her hand, her palm rough but comforting. "Tell me what happened, child," Martha said when the pain had passed. "What drove you to run across those fields in your condition?" Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. "Edward, my husband, he's always had a temper. When we married last year, I thought." She shook her head. "It doesn't matter what I thought. The first time he hit me, I told myself it was the whiskey. The second time, I told myself it was my fault." Martha's expression remained neutral, though her eyes flickered with anger. "And when you found out about the baby," he was pleased at first, "an heir for his ranch." Olivia's hand protectively covered her belly, but then he started saying terrible things, that I'd tricked him, that the baby wasn't his. A sob escaped her. "Today he came home drunk, said when the baby came he'd know for sure if I'd been faithful and if not." "Eshachach," Martha soothed, stroking Olivia's hair. "You don't need to say more, you did right to leave." "But where can I go? I have no money, no family nearby. My parents died 3 years ago and my only brother is somewhere in California." "First things first," Martha said firmly. "Let's bring this little one safely into the world, then we'll figure out the rest. Benjamin Blackwell is a good man. He won't turn you out, especially not with a newborn." Olivia nodded, too exhausted to argue. As another contraction began building, she couldn't help wondering about the tall cowboy with the kind eyes who had appeared like an answer to a desperate prayer. In the midst of her fear and pain, one thing was certain: she had never felt as safe with Edward as she did in the brief moments when Benjamin Blackwell had held her on his horse, promising protection. Outside the bedroom door, Benjamin paced the hallway, his footsteps heavy with worry. Frank, his longtime foreman, watched from the end of the corridor. "Boss, you're going to wear a hole in that floorboard," the older man observed dryly. Benjamin ran a hand through his dark hair, having discarded his hat when they'd entered the house. "She's running from Thornwood, Frank." The foreman let out a low whistle. "Edward Thornwood, mean son of a," he caught himself. "Sorry, boss. No, you're right. I've heard stories about him at the saloon in Lerdo. Never had dealings with him myself, but his reputation speaks for itself." Benjamin's jaw tightened. "And now his pregnant wife is in my spare bedroom, possibly losing their child because she was so desperate to get away she ran through fields in this heat." Frank leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "What are you planning to do?" "What can I do? I can't turn her away." "Thornwood won't take kindly to you harboring his wife." Benjamin's blue eyes hardened. "Let him come. This is my land." A muffled cry from behind the bedroom door made both men stiffen. Benjamin's hand instinctively moved toward the doorknob, but he stopped himself. "Martha knows what she's doing," Frank reminded him. "Best leave the women's business to her." Benjamin nodded reluctantly. "You're right. But maybe send one of the boys to fetch Dr. Wilson from town just in case." "Already done," Frank assured him. "Should be here within the hour, weather permitting." Another cry, louder this time, made Benjamin wince. "I hate this waiting," he muttered. Frank's weathered face creased in a knowing smile. "For a man who just met this woman, you seem mighty concerned, boss." Benjamin shot him a warning glance. "She's in trouble, Frank, that's all. If you say so." The older man pushed off from the wall. "I'll go check on the doctor's progress. You keep wearing out that floorboard." Left alone with his thoughts, Benjamin tried to make sense of the fierce protectiveness he felt toward Olivia Brewer. He had known her less than 2 hours, yet when he'd seen her struggling through that wheat field, something had shifted inside him. The vulnerability in her eyes, the courage it must have taken to flee in her condition, it stirred admiration and something deeper he wasn't ready to name. Inside the bedroom, Olivia gripped the bedsheets as another contraction ripped through her. They were coming faster now, barely 5 minutes apart. "That's it, breathe through it," Martha encouraged, wiping Olivia's forehead with a cool cloth. You're doing wonderfully." When the pain subsided, Olivia collapsed against the pillows. "It's too early," she whispered fearfully. "The baby shouldn't come for another 2 months." Martha checked beneath the blankets and frowned slightly. "Sometimes stress can bring on labor, but you're right, it's early." "We've sent for the doctor." "What if?" Olivia couldn't finish the question, too terrified to voice her deepest fear. Martha took her hand. "Now you listen to me, Olivia Brewer. I've helped bring more than 30 babies into this world, and some of them were early too. God willing, this little one will be just fine. You focus on staying strong and leave the rest to us." A sharp knock at the door preceded it opening just enough for Benjamin to peer in, his eyes carefully averted. "Martha, Dr. Wilson has arrived," he announced. "I've shown him to the washroom to clean up after his ride." "Thank the Lord," Martha sighed. "Send him in as soon as he's ready." Benjamin hesitated. "Is there anything else you need? Anything I can do?" Martha smiled faintly. "Some hot water and clean towels wouldn't go amiss." "Consider it done." His gaze shifted briefly to Olivia, their eyes meeting across the room. "Hang in there, Miss Brewer. You're not alone anymore." The sincerity in his voice brought fresh tears to Olivia's eyes as another contraction began. This time, she didn't try to stifle her cry of pain. Benjamin closed the door quickly, his face pale. In the hallway, he nearly collided with Dr. Wilson, a thin man in his 50s with spectacles and a serious expression. "She sounds like she's progressing quickly," the doctor observed, medical bag in hand. "How far along is she?" 7 months, she says, Benjamin replied, running a hand through his hair. "Will the baby?" He couldn't finish the question. Dr. Wilson's expression softened slightly. "I've seen 7-month babies survive and thrive, Mr. Blackwell. It depends on many factors. I'll do everything I can." He placed a reassuring hand on Benjamin's shoulder. "Now, I believe Martha requested hot water and towels." "Right," Benjamin nodded, grateful for something concrete to do. "I'll see to it." As the doctor entered the bedroom, Benjamin hurried to the kitchen, his mind racing. If Olivia and her child survived this ordeal, what then? Thornwood would surely come looking for his wife. The man had connections in the county, friends in the sheriff's office, business ties with the mayor. Benjamin's modest cattle operation gave him some standing in the community, but not enough to openly defy someone of Thornwood's influence. Yet as he pumped water into a large pot and set it to boil on the stove, Benjamin knew with absolute certainty that he could not send Olivia back to that man. Something about her had awakened a protective instinct so powerful it frightened him. He hadn't felt this way since losing his wife Sarah to fever 5 years ago. The thought of Sarah gave him pause. He had believed after her death that his heart had closed off permanently, that he would live out his days as a widower focused on building his ranch. He'd had opportunities to court again. Several local widows and unmarried women had made their interest clear, but none had sparked even the faintest flicker of what he'd once felt for Sarah. Until today, when a pregnant stranger had stumbled into his life, bringing with her complications and dangers he couldn't begin to anticipate. "You're a fool, Ben Blackwell," he muttered to himself as he gathered clean towels from a cabinet. The water had just begun to boil when a heart-wrenching scream echoed through the house. Benjamin nearly dropped the pot in his haste to remove it from the stove. Balancing the water carefully and clutching the towels under his arm, he hurried back toward the bedroom, his heart pounding in rhythm with Olivia's cries. Frank intercepted him in the hallway, taking the heavy pot from his hands. "I've got this, boss. You should wait in your study." This could go on for hours. "I need to do something, Frank," Benjamin insisted. "I can't just sit and listen to her suffering." "Birth is women's business," the foreman replied firmly. "Martha and the doc know what they're doing." Besides, you've got another problem to consider. Thornwood. Frank nodded grimly. If he discovers she's here when, Benjamin corrected. Not if. When. Thornwood has too many eyes and ears in this county. It's only a matter of time before someone spots her or word gets back to him. Then you'd best be preparing for that confrontation, instead of wearing yourself out with worry over something you can't control. Benjamin knew his foreman was right, but the sound of another pained cry from behind the bedroom door made his resolve waver. "Take those in," he said finally, gesturing to the water and towels. "But come get me if anything changes." Frank nodded, understanding the unspoken concern. "I will. Now go clear your head. Maybe check your rifle while you're at it." The hours that followed were among the longest of Benjamin's life. He cleaned his Winchester repeating rifle, inspected his Colt revolver, and paced the confines of his study until the floorboards creaked in protest. Outside, darkness fell over the ranch, and the usual evening sounds: cattle lowing in the distance, night birds calling. The occasional coyote howl seemed muted, as if the whole world were holding its breath along with him. Just past midnight, a different sound cut through the quiet: the thin, wavering cry of a newborn baby. Benjamin froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. The cry came again, stronger this time, followed by indistinct voices from the blue bedroom. Unable to contain himself any longer, Benjamin strode from his study and down the hall. He had just raised his hand to knock when the door opened, revealing Dr. Wilson. The physician's shirt sleeves were rolled up, and his forearms bore traces of blood despite having been hastily washed. His expression, however, held cautious optimism. "A girl," he announced before Benjamin could speak. "Small as expected for coming early, but with a healthy set of lungs on her." Relief flooded through Benjamin. "And Miss Brewer, exhausted but stable." "She lost more blood than I'd like, but she's young and strong. With proper rest and care, she should recover fully. Can I?" Benjamin gestured vaguely toward the room. Dr. Wilson considered for a moment, then nodded. Briefly. "They both need rest." The bedroom had transformed during the long hours of labor. The neat bedding was now rumpled and partially stripped, with fresh sheets beneath Olivia. Several bloody towels had been discreetly gathered in a basin, and the room smelled of sweat, blood, and something antiseptic the doctor had used. But Benjamin noticed none of this. His attention was captured entirely by the tableau on the bed: Olivia, pale but radiant, propped against pillows with a tiny bundle cradled against her chest. Martha stood nearby, her usually stern face softened with a maternal smile as she watched the new mother with her child. "Mr. Blackwell," Olivia said softly when she noticed him in the doorway. Her voice was hoarse from hours of exertion. "Come meet my daughter." Something in her invitation, the simple inclusion, the trust it implied, made Benjamin's throat tighten with emotion. He approached the bed carefully, as if afraid his large frame and heavy boots might somehow disturb the fragile peace of this moment. The baby was impossibly small, her skin still reddened from birth, with a shock of dark hair plastered to her tiny head. As Benjamin watched, she yawned, her miniature features scrunching in a gesture so human, and yet so new that it made his heart clench. "She's beautiful," he said, his voice rougher than usual, "just like her mother." A blush colored Olivia's pale cheeks, and she ducked her head slightly. "Thank you for everything. I don't know how I can ever repay your kindness." "There's nothing to repay," Benjamin assured her. "Anyone would have done the same," Martha snorted softly. "Not anyone, Mr. Blackwell, and you know it." She patted Olivia's shoulder. "You rest now, dearie. I'll be right next door if you need anything during the night," as Martha ushered a reluctant Dr. Wilson from the room, promising him coffee and food before his ride back to town. Benjamin found himself momentarily alone with Olivia and her newborn daughter. "Have you thought of a name?" he asked, perching carefully on the edge of the bed. Olivia looked down at the baby who had fallen asleep against her chest. "Esther," she said after a moment, "after my mother, Esther Grace." "It's a fine name," Benjamin approved, "strong like her." "Mr. Blackwell, Benjamin, please," he interrupted, "or Ben. After what we've been through today, I think formality seems a bit silly." A small smile played at the corners of Olivia's mouth. "Benjamin, then. I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." He nodded, suddenly apprehensive. "Edward will come looking for me for us," she said, her arms tightening protectively around little Esther. "When he does, what will happen?" The direct question caught Benjamin off guard, though he had been wrestling with this very issue all evening. He could offer platitudes, assure her that everything would work out somehow, but Olivia Brewer had endured too much to be treated like a delicate flower who couldn't handle the truth. "I won't lie to you, Olivia," he said carefully. "Thornwood has influence in these parts. If he comes with the law behind him." He trailed off, not wanting to voice the worst possibilities. "He could force me to return," she finished for him, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Or take Esther." "That won't happen," Benjamin said with more confidence than he felt. "I give you my word, we have options. Such as, for one, we're not far from the Mexican border. If necessary, we could cross over to Nuevo Laredo." Olivia's eyes widened. "You would leave your ranch for us? Strangers you just met?" Benjamin held her gaze, surprised by his own certainty. "If that's what it takes to keep you and Esther safe, yes. But that's a last resort. First, we need to establish that you had good reason to leave, that returning would put you and the baby in danger." "No one would believe my word against his," Olivia said bitterly. "Edward is charming in public. Everyone thinks he's a perfect gentleman." "Men like that slip up eventually," Benjamin replied, "and they make enemies. We just need to find someone willing to speak against him." The baby stirred, making tiny mewling sounds that quickly escalated to hungry cries. Olivia shifted, adjusting her nightgown to feed her daughter. Benjamin stood quickly, his cheeks coloring. "I should let you rest," he said, moving toward the door. "We can talk more in the morning." "Benjamin," Olivia called softly as he reached for the doorknob. When he turned back, she was looking at him with an expression of such vulnerable gratitude that it made his chest ache. "I wasn't just running from Edward today. I was running towards something too. I just didn't know what until you found me." The simple statement hung in the air between them, laden with meanings neither was ready to articulate. Benjamin nodded once, not trusting himself to speak, and quietly left the room. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall, overwhelmed by the day's events and the strange, powerful feelings taking root in his heart. Whatever came next, Thornwood's inevitable appearance, the legal battles that might ensue, the danger they all faced, Benjamin knew with absolute certainty that his life had irrevocably changed the moment he spotted a desperate woman running through his neighbor's wheat field. And he wouldn't have it any other way. 3 days passed in relative peace at the Blackwell ranch. Olivia regained her strength slowly, spending most of her time in bed with baby Esther, who despite her early arrival showed promising signs of health. Dr. Wilson returned each day to check on mother and child, expressing guarded optimism about the infant's chances. "Keep her warm and well fed," he instructed Olivia on the 3rd afternoon. "Her lungs sound clear, which is the main concern with premature births. If she continues taking to the breast well, I'd say her odds improve significantly each day." Olivia nodded, cradling her sleeping daughter close. The miracle of Esther's survival wasn't lost on her, nor was the role Benjamin and his household had played in making it possible. When might I be able to travel? She asked the doctor quietly. Dr. Wilson's eyebrows rose. Travel, my dear Mrs. Thornwood, Miss Brewer, she corrected firmly. I no longer consider myself Edward Thornwood's wife. The doctor cleared his throat uncomfortably. As you wish. But regardless of your name, I wouldn't recommend traveling with a premature infant for at least a month, preferably two. The risk of exposure to illness alone. I understand, Olivia sighed. Thank you, doctor. After the physician had gone, Martha brought Olivia a tray with chicken soup, fresh bread, and a cup of chamomile tea. The cook had been a constant presence, teaching Olivia the basics of caring for a newborn with practical efficiency. You've been so kind, Olivia said as Martha helped her sit up against the pillows. All of you. I don't know what I would have done without you. Martha arranged the tray across Olivia's lap. Mr. Blackwell has a good heart. Lost his wife 5 years back to mountain fever and it near broke him. Threw himself into building this ranch, rarely taking a day off or enjoying himself. She smiled faintly. Been different these past few days, though. Got a purpose in his step again. The implication in Martha's words made Olivia blush. He feels responsible for us, that's all. Any decent man would. Martha hummed noncommittally. Eat your soup before it gets cold. Growing that milk for little Esther takes plenty of nourishment. After Martha left, Olivia ate methodically, her mind turning over the cook's observations. She couldn't deny the connection she felt with Benjamin, something that had sparked in that first moment in the wheat field, and had only grown stronger with each interaction since. His gentle manner with Esther, the respect he showed Olivia, the quiet determination with which he approached their precarious situation, all of it drew her to him in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. But she had made one disastrous choice in a husband already. Could she trust her judgment now, especially when her emotions were heightened by gratitude and the vulnerability of her position? And even if her feelings were genuine, what right did she have to entangle Benjamin in her troubles? Edward wouldn't rest until he found her, and when he did. A soft knock at the door interrupted her troubled thoughts. Benjamin entered at her invitation, his tall frame filling the doorway. He had clearly just come in from working outdoors. His shirt bore traces of dust, and his face was slightly flushed from exertion in the Texas heat. "How are my two favorite ladies today?" he asked, his smile warming his blue eyes. The casual endearment sent a flutter through Olivia's chest. "Better," she replied. "Dr. Wilson seems pleased with Esther's progress." Benjamin approached the small cradle beside the bed where Esther slept, his expression softening as he looked down at the tiny infant. "She's a fighter like her mother." "Benjamin," Olivia began hesitantly, "I've been thinking about what happens next. Dr. Wilson says we shouldn't travel for at least a month, but I can't impose on your hospitality indefinitely. Perhaps there's a boarding house in Laredo where Esther and I could—" "No," he interrupted firmly, then moderated his tone. "That is, there's no need. You're welcome here for as long as you need." He dragged a chair closer to the bed and sat, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "In fact, I've been giving this considerable thought." Something in his serious expression made Olivia's heart race. "Oh. Edward Thornwood isn't a man to let go easily of what he considers his property," Benjamin said, his jaw tightening. "Even if he didn't truly want you or the baby, his pride wouldn't allow him to be left." "I know," Olivia whispered. "That's why I have to leave Texas as soon as possible. My brother Owen is in Sacramento. If I can reach him, there's another option," Benjamin interrupted again. "One that would give you legal protection immediately." Olivia stared at him, uncomprehending at first, then with dawning realization. "Benjamin, you can't possibly mean—" "Marriage," he confirmed, his gaze steady. As your husband, I would have legal rights that could protect both you and Esther. Thornwood's claim would be substantially weakened. Olivia's mouth opened, then closed. Of all the scenarios she had considered, this hadn't been one of them. That's absurd, she finally managed. We barely know each other. I know you're brave enough to flee a dangerous situation to protect your child, Benjamin countered. I know you're strong enough to endure childbirth in strange surroundings after running across fields in the heat. I know you're kind and thoughtful even when you're exhausted and afraid. He leaned closer. What else do I need to know? This isn't about knowing me, Olivia protested. It's about your life, your future. You can't tie yourself to a woman with another man's child just to satisfy some noble impulse. Is that what you think this is? Benjamin's voice was soft but intense. Some misplaced chivalry. What else could it be? Olivia challenged, though her heart raced treacherously. Benjamin, I've been on your ranch for 3 days. You can't possibly. I'm not claiming to be in love, he interrupted gently. Though I won't deny there's something between us, something I haven't felt in a very long time. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture Olivia had come to recognize as a sign of his agitation. This is practical, Olivia. As my wife, you'd have the protection of my name and my ranch. Esther would be legally under my care as well. And if feelings develop over time, as I suspect they might. He let the thought hang between them, unfinished but clear in its implication. Olivia looked away, overwhelmed by the unexpected proposal and the conflicting emotions it stirred within her. Part of her wanted to accept immediately, to seize this chance at safety and stability with a man who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect. But another part, the part still scarred by Edward's betrayal, hesitated. What if he contests it? She asked finally. Edward, I mean. What if he claims I'm still legally his wife? I've spoken with Judge Pearson in Laredo, Benjamin replied. He's no friend of Thornwood's. Given evidence of mistreatment, he believes we can make a case for abandonment and cruelty, especially with the doctor's testimony about your condition when you arrived here. Olivia's head snapped up. You've already discussed this with a judge. Benjamin had the grace to look slightly abashed. I wanted to understand our options before raising the subject with you. I would never presume to make this decision for you, Olivia. In the cradle, Esther began to stir, her tiny face scrunching as she worked up to a cry. Olivia automatically reached for her daughter, lifting her with practiced care, despite having been a mother for only 3 days. Benjamin watched as she settled the baby against her chest, his expression a mixture of tenderness and determination. We can wait until you're stronger, of course. There's no rush. Isn't there? Olivia asked softly, rocking Esther gently. You and I both know Edward won't wait much longer before he starts searching. When he does. A commotion outside interrupted their conversation. Horses in the yard, men's voices raised in greeting or challenge. It was hard to tell which. Benjamin was on his feet in an instant, moving to the window to peer through the curtains. Frank's talking to someone, he reported, his posture tense. 2 riders, I don't recognize them. Fear clawed at Olivia's throat. Is it not Thornwood himself? Benjamin assured her quickly. But they could be his men. He strode to the door. Stay here. Keep Esther quiet if you can. I'll handle this. Before Olivia could respond, he was gone, closing the door firmly behind him. She clutched her daughter closer, straining to hear the conversation outside, but the thick walls of the ranch house muffled the sounds too effectively. Minutes ticked by like hours as Olivia waited, imagining the worst. Had Edward discovered her whereabouts already? Would he send men to drag her back to take her baby? Or worse, had he decided she wasn't worth the trouble and sent men to eliminate the problem permanently? The door opened suddenly, causing Olivia to gasp in fright. But it was only Martha, her usually unflappable demeanor showing signs of strain. "Men asking questions," the cook reported in a low voice. "Looking for a pregnant woman seen running through the Miller wheat fields 3 days ago." "Edward sent them," Olivia whispered, terror constricting her chest. Martha nodded grimly. "Seems likely. Mr. Blackwell's telling them he hasn't seen anyone matching your description, but they're being persistent, asking to look around the property." "He can't let them in," Olivia said desperately. "If they find us, Mr. Blackwell knows what he's doing," Martha assured her. "Frank and the boys are out there too, making it clear these visitors aren't welcome to snoop." She crossed to the window, peeking out cautiously. "They're leaving," she reported after a moment, relief evident in her voice. "Riding off toward town." Olivia sagged against the pillows, momentarily weak with relief, but the respite was short-lived as the implications sank in. "They'll be back," she said, meeting Martha's concerned gaze. "And next time it might be Edward himself or the sheriff." Martha's weathered face set in determined lines. "Then we'd best be prepared, hadn't we?" When Benjamin returned to the bedroom a few minutes later, his expression was grave. "Thornwood's men," he confirmed what they already suspected. Claiming to be concerned about a confused pregnant woman who wandered off from Thornwood Ranch, said her husband is worried sick about her and the baby. Bile rose in Olivia's throat at the pretense. "Did they believe you?" Hard to say. Benjamin paced the small room, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. "I told them I'd been working the north pasture all week and hadn't seen anyone. Suggested they check with the Thompson family, whose farm borders Thornwood's property to the west." "Sending them in the wrong direction," Olivia noted with grim approval. "It won't fool them for long." Benjamin stopped pacing, his decision apparently made. "We need to act quickly. The judge can be here tomorrow morning if I send a rider now. We could be married by noon." The reality of what he was proposing hit Olivia anew. "Benjamin, are you absolutely certain? This is your life we're talking about, your future." He crossed to the bed and, after a moment's hesitation, sat beside her, careful not to disturb Esther, who had fallen back asleep. Gently, he took Olivia's free hand in his. "When Sarah died," he began quietly, "I thought that part of my life was over. I focused on building this ranch, making it into something that would last. I told myself it was enough." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "But when I saw you in that field, something woke up inside me, something I thought was gone forever." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes. "Benjamin, I'm not asking for promises, Olivia. I'm offering you one: safety, respect, a home for you and Esther, and maybe, in time, something more." His blue eyes held hers steadily. "Will you marry me? Not just for protection, but because there's a chance for something real between us." The question hung between them, weighted with possibility. Olivia looked down at her sleeping daughter, then back at Benjamin's earnest face. In the 3 days she had known him, he had shown more kindness, more respect, and more genuine care than Edward had in a year of marriage. Perhaps that was enough of a foundation to build upon. "Yes," she whispered, squeezing his hand. "Yes, I'll marry you." The smile that illuminated Benjamin's face was like sunrise breaking over the Texas plains, warm, radiant, full of promise. Without thinking, he leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "I'll make you happy, Olivia," he vowed. "You and Esther both. That's a promise." As he hurried from the room to send a rider to Judge Pearson in Lerdo, Olivia touched the spot on her forehead where his lips had been, a flutter of something like hope stirring in her chest. Tomorrow would bring a new name, a new status, a new chance. Whether it would also bring Edward Thornwood and his rage remained to be seen. But for the first time since fleeing across those golden wheat fields, Olivia allowed herself to believe that the future might hold more than just fear and flight. Morning brought clear skies and a sense of nervous anticipation to the Blackwell ranch. Judge Pearson, a stout man with mutton chop whiskers and shrewd eyes, arrived shortly after breakfast, having ridden out from Laredo at first light. Benjamin greeted him in the yard, the two men talking in low voices as they made their way to the house. Olivia watched from the bedroom window, Esther sleeping peacefully in the cradle beside her. Martha had helped her dress in a simple blue gown borrowed from Benjamin's sister's trunk, altered hastily the night before to better fit Olivia's post-pregnancy figure. Her hair had been brushed until it shone, then pinned up in a modest style befitting a bride, even one marrying under such unusual circumstances. A soft knock announced Martha's return. The cook entered carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers tied with a ribbon. "From the garden," she explained, handing them to Olivia. Every bride should have flowers, no matter how hasty the wedding. Tears threatened to spill from Olivia's eyes at the thoughtful gesture. "Thank you, Martha, for everything." The older woman waved away her gratitude. "Just be happy, child. That's thanks enough." She glanced at the sleeping Esther. "I'll stay with the little one during the ceremony. It's being set up in the front parlor now." Nervousness fluttered in Olivia's stomach. In a matter of minutes, she would be taking vows for the second time in her young life. Her first marriage had begun with such hope, only to descend into a nightmare of control and abuse. Would this one, entered into so precipitously with a virtual stranger, fare any better? Yet Benjamin wasn't truly a stranger anymore. In the few days since he had found her in that wheat field, he had shown her more consideration and respect than Edward had in a year of courtship and marriage. The way he looked at her as if she were something precious, something to be protected but not possessed, gave her hope that this union, unconventional as it was, might actually bring happiness. "It's time," Martha announced, breaking into Olivia's thoughts. "Judge Pearson is ready." Taking a deep breath, Olivia nodded and followed Martha from the room, pausing only to brush a gentle finger across Esther's tiny cheek. "I'm doing this for you, little one," she whispered. "For both of us." The front parlor had been transformed for the occasion. Someone had cleared away the usual furnishings, leaving only a few chairs for the witnesses. Frank, Dr. Wilson, who had returned that morning to check on Esther, and a couple of the ranch hands. Fresh-cut wildflowers similar to those in Olivia's bouquet had been arranged in mason jars on the mantel and windowsills, bringing color and a sweet scent to the room. And there, standing before Judge Pearson, was Benjamin. He had clearly made an effort with his appearance. His dark hair was neatly combed, his face freshly shaved, and he wore a clean white shirt with his best waistcoat and trousers. But it was his expression, as Olivia entered the room, that took her breath away, a mixture of awe, admiration, and something deeper that made her cheeks flush. Judge Pearson cleared his throat as Olivia took her place beside Benjamin. "Given the unusual circumstances," he began, his voice carrying a formal weight, "I've prepared a brief ceremony. Before we begin, I must ask, Miss Brewer, are you entering into this marriage of your own free will without coercion?" "I am," Olivia replied, her voice stronger than she expected. The judge nodded, satisfied. "Mr. Blackwell." "Absolutely," Benjamin confirmed, his eyes never leaving Olivia's face. "Very well. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." The ceremony itself passed in something of a blur for Olivia. She was aware of the judge's solemn words, of Benjamin's warm hand holding hers, of the simple gold band he placed on her finger, a ring that had belonged to his mother. He explained in a whisper. She spoke her vows clearly, promising to honor and cherish this man who had become her unexpected champion. And then Judge Pearson was pronouncing them husband and wife, and Benjamin was leaning down to place a chaste but tender kiss on her lips, his hand gentle at her waist. The small gathering applauded. Martha dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. And just like that, Olivia Brewer became Olivia Blackwell. As congratulations were offered and Martha bustled off to bring out the wedding cake she had baked that morning, Judge Pearson drew Benjamin and Olivia aside. "I've filed the marriage certificate with an expedited notation," he informed them in a low voice. "Given the circumstances, I've also prepared preliminary paperwork regarding the dissolution of the previous union." He glanced at Olivia. "I'll need a statement from you about the conditions that led to your departure from Thornwood Ranch." "Of course," Olivia agreed, though the thought of recounting Edward's abuse made her stomach clench. "And Dr. Wilson has already provided his medical assessment," the judge continued. "The injuries he observed upon your arrival here are consistent with your account of mistreatment." Benjamin's hand tightened around Olivia's at this confirmation of what he had suspected, but hadn't pushed her to discuss in detail. "What happens next?" he asked the judge. "Thornwood will be served with papers notifying him of the dissolution petition and the new marriage." Judge Pearson's expression grew grave. "He's likely to contest both, Mr. Blackwell. You should be prepared." "We are," Benjamin assured him, though Olivia felt a tremor of fear at the thought of Edward's reaction to the news. After the judge and doctor departed, promising to return if needed, the small celebration continued in the ranch house kitchen. Martha had outdone herself with a simple but elegant wedding breakfast: fresh biscuits, ham, eggs, and a small cake decorated with sugar and wild berries. The ranch hands offered toasts to the newlyweds, their rough humor and genuine affection for Benjamin evident in every word. Through it all, Olivia felt as if she were watching from a slight distance, the events surreal in their sudden transformation of her life. Yesterday, she had been a frightened woman on the run. Today, she was Mrs. Benjamin Blackwell, mistress of a modest but prosperous ranch, with legal protection and a community of people who seemed ready to accept her as one of their own. Only the occasional cry from Esther, brought downstairs by Martha to join the celebration, reminded Olivia of the reality of her situation and the dangers that still lurked. Edward wouldn't accept this turn of events quietly. When he learned of her remarriage and of Esther's birth, his rage would know no bounds. Benjamin, seeming to sense her unease, kept close to her throughout the morning, his hand often finding the small of her back or her elbow in a gesture that was protective without being possessive. When the ranch hands finally dispersed to their duties and Martha was occupied with clearing the table, he led Olivia to the front porch where they could speak privately. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. "It's been a whirlwind few days." Olivia managed a small smile. "That's putting it mildly." They sat side by side on the porch swing, the warm May breeze carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. Benjamin's arm rested along the back of the swing, not quite touching her but close enough that she could feel his presence. "I've been thinking," he said after a companionable silence. "About sleeping arrangements." Olivia tensed slightly, uncertainty flashing across her face. Benjamin noticed immediately and hurried to clarify. "I want you to be comfortable, Olivia. The blue bedroom is yours for as long as you need. I'll continue to use my room down the hall." Relief and something like disappointment mingled in Olivia's chest. "You don't expect." "I expect nothing," he assured her firmly. "This marriage may have legal purposes, but that doesn't mean you owe me anything of that nature. Not until you're ready, if you ever are." The sincerity in his voice brought tears to Olivia's eyes. Edward had never considered her comfort or desires, viewing her body as his right from their wedding night onward. Benjamin's respect for her boundaries, especially after all he had done for her, touched her deeply. "Thank you," she whispered, "for understanding." His smile was warm. "We have time, Olivia, time to know each other, to build trust. I meant what I said yesterday. I believe there's something real growing between us, but I'm willing to let it develop naturally." They sat in silence for a few more minutes, the swing moving gently beneath them. Olivia found herself leaning slightly toward Benjamin's solid presence, drawn to his warmth and steadiness. The peaceful moment was shattered by the sound of approaching horses, multiple riders, moving fast. Benjamin was on his feet instantly, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip. "Get inside," he ordered, his voice tight. "Find Martha and stay with Esther." Olivia hurried to obey, her heart pounding with fear. From inside the house, she heard Benjamin calling for Frank and the other hands. By the time she reached the blue bedroom where Martha was changing Esther's swaddling, the sound of voices, men shouting, drifted up from the front yard. "What's happening?" Martha demanded, her weathered face creased with concern. "Riders," Olivia replied, rushing to the window. "I couldn't see who." From this vantage point, she had a clear view of the confrontation unfolding in the yard. Benjamin stood on the porch steps, his posture radiating tension but also authority. Frank and two other ranch hands flanked him, each man armed. Facing them were 5 mounted men, their horses lathered from hard riding. And at their center, his face contorted with rage even from this distance, was Edward Thornwood. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. Even after everything, the sight of her first husband sent ice through her veins. Edward was a handsome man in the conventional sense, tall, well-built, with golden hair and aristocratic features that charmed most who met him. But Olivia knew the cruelty that lay beneath that appealing exterior, the volatile temper that could explode at the slightest provocation. "It's him," she whispered, her arms instinctively tightening around Esther. "Edward's found us." Martha moved to her side, peering out the window. "Mr. Blackwell won't let him near you," she said with quiet confidence. "Nor will Frank and the boys." Below, the confrontation was escalating. Edward's voice carried clearly through the open window. "I know she's here, Blackwell. My wife, my child. You've got no right to keep them from me." Benjamin's response was too low to hear clearly, but his stance remained unwavering. One of Edward's men moved his horse forward aggressively, only to be met by Frank raising his rifle in warning. "The law's on my side," Edward shouted. "She's my wife, legally bound to me. Whatever she's told you is lies. She's not right in the head, especially in her condition." Again, Benjamin's reply was too quiet to discern, but something in what he said made Edward's face flush with fury. "Married," he bellowed. "That's impossible. She's already married to me." Olivia flinched at the rage in his voice, memories of that same tone preceding violence washing over her. Beside her, Martha placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Judge Pearson has recognized their marriage," the cook murmured. "Mr. Blackwell made sure of that." Below, Edward was dismounting, his movements jerky with anger. "I want to see her, now. Or I'm coming in there with or without your permission." Benjamin stepped forward, his hand resting openly on his revolver. "That would be unwise, Thornwood. This is my property and you're not welcome here." Edward sneered. "Your property? Like my wife is now your property. Tell me, does she warm your bed the way she did mine?" Even from a distance, Olivia could see the muscle jump in Benjamin's jaw, but his voice when he responded was controlled. "Mrs. Blackwell is my wife now, legally and properly. The judge has been informed of the circumstances of her departure from your home, including the evidence of mistreatment documented by our town physician." Edward's laugh was ugly. "Mistreatment? Is that what the little harlot told you? Did she mention how I found her flirting with one of my ranch hands? How I caught them together in my own barn? The vicious lie made Olivia gasp. That never happened, she whispered to Martha, though the cook's dismissive snort made it clear she didn't believe Edward for a moment. You should go now, Benjamin was saying, his voice carrying more clearly as the tension in the yard ratcheted higher. Before this gets uglier than it already is, the judge will contact you about the legal proceedings. Edward took another step forward, only to find himself facing the business end of Frank's Winchester. This isn't over, Blackwell, not by a long shot. That's my child she's carrying. The child has been born, Benjamin replied evenly. A healthy daughter despite the stress her mother endured fleeing your abuse. She's under my protection now, as is my wife. For a moment, surprise flashed across Edward's face, quickly replaced by calculating rage. A daughter, he repeated. Well, that changes things, doesn't it? Not much use to me, a girl. The casual dismissal of his own child, born just days earlier, cemented for Olivia everything she had come to understand about Edward Thornwood's character. This was a man who viewed women, even his own daughter, as property, as tools for his ambitions rather than as human beings worthy of love and respect. In contrast, Benjamin's protective stance, the careful way he handled Esther, his respect for Olivia's boundaries all spoke of a man whose strength was matched by his compassion. I've made my position clear, Thornwood, Benjamin was saying, his voice hardening. Now get off my land before I have my men remove you. For a tense moment, it seemed Edward might escalate the confrontation further. His hand hovered near his own gun, his face twisted with thwarted rage. But a glance at the determined expressions of Benjamin and his men apparently convinced him that this battle, at least, wasn't worth the risk. This isn't over, he repeated, backing toward his horse. Not even close. You've stolen what's mine, Blackwell. I don't forgive that kind of theft. Benjamin remained silent as Edward remounted, his cold eyes scanning the ranch house as if trying to peer through the walls to where Olivia watched. Then, with a sharp command to his men, Edward wheeled his horse around and galloped away, his companions following in a cloud of dust. Olivia sagged against the window frame, weak with relief. He's gone, she breathed. For now, Martha nodded grimly. For now, she agreed, but Mr. Thornwood doesn't strike me as a man who gives up easily. No, Olivia confirmed, looking down at Esther's peaceful face, unaware of the danger that had just passed. He isn't. Footsteps on the stairs announced Benjamin's approach. He appeared in the doorway moments later, his expression tense but controlled. You heard? Olivia nodded. Most of it. He was. Exactly as I remembered. Benjamin crossed the room to stand beside her, his gaze taking in mother and child with a protective intensity that made Olivia's heart flutter despite the circumstances. He won't get near either of you, he promised. I've sent one of the boys to inform Judge Pearson about Thornwood's visit. The judge will make sure the legal proceedings move forward quickly. And if Edward ignores the law, Olivia asked quietly, voicing the fear that had settled in her chest. If he decides to take matters into his own hands. Benjamin's jaw set in a determined line. Then he'll find out exactly how seriously I take my vows to protect my family. His hand came to rest gently on Esther's head, his large fingers careful against her delicate skin. Both of you. The word family echoed in Olivia's mind, unexpected but welcome. In the space of 4 days, she had gone from a desperate woman fleeing abuse to a wife and mother with a home and protector. The circumstances were extraordinary, the danger still present, but in that moment, with Benjamin's steady presence beside her and Esther secure in her arms, Olivia allowed herself to believe that perhaps happiness wasn't as far beyond her reach as she had thought. The weeks following Edward's confrontational visit passed in a strange mixture of domestic tranquility and watchful tension at the Blackwell ranch. True to his word, Benjamin maintained a respectful distance, continuing to occupy his bedroom down the hall from Olivia and Esther. Yet despite the separate sleeping arrangements, a natural intimacy developed between them through the rhythms of daily life shared. Benjamin proved to be a patient teacher, showing Olivia the workings of the ranch house and introducing her to the hands who kept the cattle operation running smoothly. Frank, in particular, became a steadfast ally, his gruff exterior hiding a soft spot for both Olivia and little Esther. "Never thought I'd see the boss smile so much," the foreman commented one evening as they watched Benjamin demonstrate to Olivia how to work the pump at the kitchen sink. "Does a man good to see." For her part, Olivia threw herself into learning the role of a rancher's wife with determination born of both gratitude and a genuine desire to build a life here. She helped Martha with the cooking, learned to manage the household accounts, and even began to ride again, a pleasure Edward had forbidden during their marriage, claiming it was unladylike. Benjamin had been surprised but pleased to discover her riding skill. "Where did you learn?" he asked as they exercised their horses one warm June morning, Esther safely back at the house with Martha. "My father raised quarter horses on our farm in Kentucky," Olivia explained, enjoying the feel of the gentle mare Benjamin had selected for her. "I practically grew up in the saddle. When Edward courted me, he seemed to admire my riding. It was only after we married that he decided it wasn't proper for his wife to gallop across the countryside." Benjamin frowned. "There's a lot Thornwood and I disagree on, but that might be near the top of the list. A woman who can ride well is a blessing on a ranch." The simple appreciation in his voice warmed Olivia from the inside out. More and more, she found herself comparing the two men, Edward's controlling criticism against Benjamin's encouraging support, Edward's volatile temper against Benjamin's steady calm, Edward's cold disinterest in her thoughts and feelings against Benjamin's genuine curiosity and attentiveness. And increasingly, she found herself wondering what it might be like to truly be Benjamin's wife in all ways, not just in name. As if sensing her thoughts, Benjamin glanced over, a question in his blue eyes. "What are you thinking about? You've gone quiet." Heat rose in Olivia's cheeks. "Just reflecting on how different my life is now compared to a month ago. Better, I hope." There was a vulnerability in his question that touched her. "Much better," she assured him with a smile. "I don't know how to thank you, Benjamin, for everything." He guided his horse closer to hers, their legs nearly touching as they rode side by side. "You don't need to thank me, Olivia, having you and Esther here." He paused, searching for words. "It's like the ranch was just a place before. Now it's becoming a home again." The simple confession hung in the air between them, charged with meaning neither was quite ready to articulate fully. Olivia's heart beat faster as Benjamin's gaze lingered on her face, his expression softening in a way that made her feel both seen and cherished. The moment was broken by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Benjamin's hand went instantly to his revolver, his posture shifting from relaxed to alert in a heartbeat. But it was only Frank, riding toward them with purpose. "Rider coming up the road," the foreman reported as he reached them. "Just one, looks like the judge's clerk." Benjamin's tension eased slightly, though his expression remained cautious. "Let's head back to the house." The visitor proved to be Micah Reynolds, Judge Pearson's young assistant, bearing official papers regarding Edward's petition contesting the dissolution of his marriage to Olivia and the validity of her subsequent marriage to Benjamin. "The judge wanted you to have these right away," Micah explained as they sat in Benjamin's study. Mr. Thornwood is making quite a fuss in town, claiming Mrs. Blackwell, that is, your wife, sir, was kidnapped and forced into this marriage against her will. Olivia's hands trembled as she looked through the legal documents. No one would believe such nonsense, would they? Some might, Micah admitted reluctantly. Mr. Thornwood is persuasive and well-connected, but the judge is firmly on your side, especially with Dr. Wilson's testimony about your condition when you arrived here. Benjamin's face was grim as he reviewed the papers. A hearing is scheduled for next week, Micah nodded. Judge Pearson wants to resolve this quickly, before Mr. Thornwood can rally more support or take matters into his own hands. After the clerk had departed, Olivia sat in the study, the legal documents spread before her on Benjamin's desk. He won't give up, she said quietly. Edward never does when his pride is involved. Benjamin knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. He won't win, Olivia. I promise you that. She met his earnest gaze, drawing strength from his confidence. I believe you, it's just, I know what he's capable of when he feels cornered. We'll be careful, Benjamin assured her. Extra hands on watch, someone with you and Esther at all times when I'm not here. His thumb traced circles on her palm, a soothing gesture that sent warmth up her arm. But we can't live in fear forever. Eventually, this will be resolved one way or another. The determination in his voice stirred something in Olivia admiration. Yes, but also a deeper feeling that had been growing steadily since that first day in the wheat field. Without thinking, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his in a kiss that started as a gesture of gratitude but quickly transformed into something more. Benjamin froze for a split second in surprise before responding, his hand coming up to cradle her cheek with exquisite gentleness. The kiss deepened, a month's worth of unspoken feelings and growing attraction finally finding expression. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Benjamin's eyes searched Olivia's face. "Are you sure?" he asked softly. "About us?" Olivia nodded, her heart too full for words in that moment. Whatever happened with Edward, whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew with sudden clarity that her feelings for Benjamin were real, not born of gratitude or desperation, but of genuine admiration, respect, and growing love. "I'm sure," she whispered, and the smile that illuminated Benjamin's face was like sunrise breaking over the plains, radiant with promise and new beginnings. That night, for the first time, Olivia came to Benjamin's room, Esther sleeping peacefully in her cradle across the hall under Martha's watchful eye. What passed between them was tender, unhurried, a mutual exploration and affirmation rather than a claiming. Benjamin's touch was reverent, his concern for her comfort constant, his patience unlimited. It was nothing like the dutiful submission Edward had demanded. With Benjamin, Olivia discovered a partnership of equals, each giving and receiving pleasure, each attentive to the other's needs and desires. When they finally lay together in the aftermath, her head resting on his chest, his arm curved protectively around her shoulders, Olivia felt a sense of rightness, of coming home, that transcended the unusual circumstances of their union. "I never expected this," Benjamin murmured into her hair, his voice soft in the darkness. "When I rode out that day and found you in the wheat field, I never imagined." Olivia lifted her head to look at him, tracing the strong line of his jaw with her fingertip. "I know. It's like something from a novel, the desperate woman rescued by the handsome cowboy," she smiled. "Except I think in the novels, the cowboy is supposed to be mysterious and brooding, not kind and patient." Benjamin chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly beneath her ear. "Sorry to disappoint. I could try to be more brooding if you'd prefer." "Don't you dare," Olivia laughed, snuggling closer. I like you exactly as you are." They fell silent, comfortable in each other's arms, the weight of the coming hearing temporarily set aside in favor of this newfound intimacy. "Benjamin." Olivia ventured after a while, her voice hesitant. "MMM." He sounded drowsy but content. "Whatever happens with Edward with the hearing, I want you to know that it's real for me, not just convenient or necessary, but real." His arms tightened around her. "It's real for me too, Olivia. More real than anything has been in a very long time." She pressed a kiss to his chest over his heart. "Then we'll face whatever comes together. As a family." "As a family," he echoed, the simple phrase containing all the promise and commitment either of them needed in that moment. The day of the hearing dawned clear and hot, the June sun already fierce as Benjamin, Olivia, and a small entourage departed the ranch for Laredo. Dr. Wilson had advised that Esther, now nearly a month old and thriving despite her early arrival, should remain at the ranch with Martha rather than endure the heat and dust of the journey to town. Parting from her daughter, even for a day, had been wrenching for Olivia. "We'll be back by nightfall," Benjamin promised as he helped her into the buggy, understanding her anxiety. Martha would fight off a mountain lion with her wooden spoon before letting anyone near Esther. The image made Olivia smile despite her nerves. "I know she's in good hands. It's just—" "You're a mother," Benjamin said simply. "It's natural to worry." He squeezed her hand. "Frank and 2 of the boys are staying behind. No one's getting near the house." They traveled to Laredo in the buggy, flanked by 3 mounted ranch hands serving as guards. Benjamin had made it clear he was taking no chances with Olivia's safety, especially given Edward's increasingly erratic behavior in town, picking fights at the saloon, making wild accusations against Benjamin to anyone who would listen, and reportedly drinking heavily at all hours. "He's losing support," Judge Pearson had written in a private note delivered to the ranch. "Even his former friends find his behavior concerning, but a desperate man can be dangerous. Exercise caution." Laredo greeted them with its usual bustle, wagons and horses crowding the main street, shoppers moving between the general store, the millinery, and other businesses, cowboys fresh off the trail spending their earnings at the saloon. Several people nodded respectfully to Benjamin as they passed, a few casting curious glances at Olivia. "Word travels fast in a small community," Benjamin explained, noting her unease at the attention. "Everyone knows something of our situation by now, though not necessarily the whole truth." The courthouse stood at the end of the main street, an imposing 2-story structure of red brick with white trim. As they approached, Olivia's grip on Benjamin's arm tightened. A small crowd had gathered on the steps, and at its center, his face flushed with either anger or alcohol, stood Edward Thornwood. "Courage," Benjamin murmured, covering her hand with his own. "Remember, the law is on our side." Edward spotted them as they drew near, his handsome face contorting with rage. "There she is," he called loudly. "My wife stolen from me while with child. My own child, taken before I could even lay eyes on her." The performance was clearly calculated to draw sympathy from the onlookers, several of whom murmured amongst themselves, glancing from Edward to Olivia with uncertain expressions. Benjamin ignored the outburst, guiding Olivia steadily toward the courthouse entrance. Their ranch hands formed a protective barrier, preventing Edward or his supporters from approaching too closely. "Olivia," Edward called, his voice taking on a plaintive note that she recognized from past manipulations. "Darling, whatever he's told you, whatever threats he's made to keep you with him, you can tell me. I'll protect you, take you home where you belong." Bile rose in Olivia's throat at the familiar pattern, Edward creating a scene in public, playing the concerned, loving husband while privately terrorizing her. She had endured this charade numerous times during their marriage, always expected to play along, to validate his lies with her silence or forced smiles. But she wasn't that frightened woman anymore. Stopping on the courthouse steps, Olivia turned to face her former husband directly, her voice clear and steady as she addressed not just Edward but the gathered crowd. "The only threat to my safety stands right there," she declared, pointing at Edward. "This man beat me regularly throughout our marriage. When I became pregnant, he accused me of infidelity and threatened both me and my unborn child. I ran for my life and the life of my daughter." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Edward's face darkened dangerously. "Liar," he spat. "She's always been unstable, given to hysterics and wild accusations. Dr. Wilson documented her injuries the day she arrived at my ranch," Benjamin interrupted, his voice carrying over Edward's. "Judge Pearson has the medical report. There's nothing hysterical about broken ribs and bruises shaped like handprints." Edward lunged forward, only to be blocked by one of Benjamin's ranch hands. "You've poisoned her against me, Blackwell. Turned her head with your ranch and your money. Enough." The commanding voice came from the courthouse entrance, where Judge Pearson now stood, his judicial robes lending authority to his imposing figure. "This hearing will be conducted in my courtroom, not on the steps like some circus show. Mr. Thornwood, control yourself or I'll have you removed before we even begin." Edward subsided, though the murderous glare he directed at Benjamin promised this was far from over. The crowd parted to allow the judge to descend the steps and escort Olivia and Benjamin inside, leaving Edward to follow with his lawyer, a nervous-looking young man who seemed increasingly uncomfortable with his client's behavior. The courtroom was already half full with curious townspeople when they entered. Judge Pearson took his place on the bench while Olivia and Benjamin were directed to a table on one side of the room, Edward and his lawyer to the other. "These proceedings are unusual but necessary given the circumstances," Judge Pearson began once everyone was seated. "We are here to determine the legal status of the marriage between Edward Thornwood and Olivia Brewer Thornwood, and subsequently the validity of the marriage between Benjamin Blackwell and Olivia Brewer Blackwell." He fixed Edward with a stern gaze. "Mr. Thornwood, you contest the dissolution of your marriage and claim your wife was taken against her will. Is that correct?" Edward's lawyer rose. "Yes, Your Honor. My client maintains that his wife was in a delicate condition and not of sound mind when she left their home. Mr. Blackwell took advantage of her vulnerable state to manipulate her into an illegal second marriage while she was still legally bound to my client." "I see," the judge replied dryly. "And Mrs. Blackwell, what do you say to these claims?" Olivia stood, her legs trembling slightly but her voice steady. "They're false, Your Honor. I fled my husband's abuse, fearing for my life and the life of my unborn child. Mr. Blackwell found me collapsed in a wheat field and offered assistance. He did not force or manipulate me in any way." "She's lying," Edward burst out, rising from his chair. "She's always been unstable, imagining slights where none exist. I never laid a hand on her." "Mr. Thornwood, control yourself," Judge Pearson warned. "You'll have your chance to speak." He turned back to Olivia. "Please continue, Mrs. Blackwell." Over the next hour, Olivia recounted her marriage to Edward, the initial charm that had won her, the gradual isolation from friends and family, the first incidents of physical abuse that escalated over time, and finally the threats against her unborn child that had driven her to flee. Dr. Wilson testified to the injuries he had observed upon her arrival at the Blackwell Ranch, injuries consistent with her account of abuse. Throughout her testimony, Benjamin sat beside her, his solid presence a comfort. Occasionally, his hand would find hers under the table, a silent gesture of support that gave her strength to continue despite Edward's increasingly agitated interruptions. When it was Edward's turn to speak, he painted a very different picture, one of a devoted husband concerned for his unstable wife, a pillar of the community whose reputation was being unfairly smeared, a father deprived of his child through trickery and manipulation. "Ask anyone in town about my character, Your Honor," Edward implored, his handsome features arranged in an expression of wounded dignity. "I've always conducted myself with honor. These accusations are nothing but the fabrications of a jealous rival who coveted my wife and found an opportunity to take her when she was vulnerable and confused." Judge Pearson listened impassively, his shrewd eyes moving between Edward's performance of righteous indignation and Olivia's quiet dignity. When both sides had presented their cases, he called for a brief recess to consider his judgment. As they waited in an anteroom, Benjamin paced while Olivia sat with her hands tightly clasped. "You did wonderfully," he assured her. "Pearson isn't fooled by Edward's act." "I hope you're right," Olivia replied, her nerves frayed after reliving the worst moments of her marriage in such detail. "Edward can be very persuasive when he wants to be. It's how he convinced me to marry him in the first place, despite my father's reservations." Benjamin knelt before her chair, taking her hands in his. "No matter what happens in there, we'll face it together. If Pearson rules against us, we'll appeal. If necessary, we'll leave Texas altogether. I meant what I said, Olivia. I won't let him take you or Esther." The fierce protectiveness in his voice steadied her. This was what real love looked like. She realized not Edward's possessive control disguised as concern, but Benjamin's unwavering support and respect for her choices. When they were called back into the courtroom, Judge Pearson's expression gave nothing away. He waited until everyone was seated before delivering his judgment in measured tones. Having heard testimony from all parties and considered the evidence presented, including Dr. Wilson's medical report, I find sufficient grounds to dissolve the marriage between Edward Thornwood and Olivia Brewer Thornwood on the basis of cruelty and endangerment. He fixed Edward with a stern gaze. "Mr. Thornwood, your behavior both in and out of this courtroom does not speak well of your character or your claims of concern for your former wife's well-being." Edward surged to his feet. "This is outrageous. You can't sit down, Mr. Thornwood," the judge ordered sharply. "I'm not finished." When Edward reluctantly complied, Pearson continued. "Furthermore, I find the marriage between Benjamin Blackwell and Olivia Brewer Blackwell to be legal and binding, while the timing was unusual, Mrs. Blackwell's testimony, and that of witnesses establishes that she entered into this union of her own free will." Relief washed over Olivia in a wave so powerful she felt lightheaded. Benjamin's hand found hers, squeezing gently in shared triumph. "As for the matter of the child," the judge went on, "having been born after Mrs. Blackwell fled Mr. Thornwood's household and subsequently married Mr. Blackwell, the infant Esther legally falls under the guardianship of her mother and Mr. Blackwell as her stepfather." He paused, his gaze moving to Edward. "However, Mr. Thornwood is the biological father, and as such has certain rights. I don't want the brat," Edward interrupted coldly. "A daughter is useless to me. Let Blackwell raise her if he's so inclined." Olivia flinched at the casual cruelty, though she had expected nothing less from Edward. Beside her, Benjamin's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. Judge Pearson's expression hardened at Edward's words. "Very well. Given Mr. Thornwood's stated disinterest and the documented history of abuse, I grant full custody of Esther Grace Blackwell to Olivia and Benjamin Blackwell." He brought his gavel down with finality. "This hearing is adjourned." As the courtroom erupted in murmurs and movement, Edward remained seated, his face a mask of fury. When he finally rose, he pointed at Benjamin with a shaking finger. "This isn't over, Blackwell," he said, his voice low but carrying clearly in the now quieting room. "You've taken everything from me, my wife, my child, my reputation. I won't forget that." "You lost those things through your own actions, Thornwood," Benjamin replied steadily. "Go home. Start over. Leave us in peace." For a moment, it seemed Edward might launch himself across the space separating them. But with a final venomous glare at both Benjamin and Olivia, he turned and stalked from the courtroom, shoving past onlookers in his haste to escape the public humiliation of his defeat. Outside the courthouse, well-wishers surrounded Olivia and Benjamin, offering congratulations and support. Several women from town approached Olivia specifically, some quietly sharing their admiration for her courage, others inviting her to social gatherings or church functions. The community was making its choice clear. The Blackwells were accepted. Edward Thornwood was not. As they prepared to depart for the ranch, eager to return to Esther and share their good news with Martha and the others, Dr. Wilson pulled Benjamin aside for a private word. "Thornwood was drinking heavily at the saloon last night," the physician reported in a low voice, "making threats, boasting about how he'd reclaim what's his one way or another." He glanced at Olivia, who was engaged in conversation with the mayor's wife nearby. "I wouldn't take his words in the courtroom lightly, Benjamin. A man like that, humiliated publicly and stripped of what he considers his property. He's dangerous." Benjamin nodded grimly. "I know. We'll be vigilant." He clasped the doctor's shoulder gratefully. "Thank you for your testimony today. It made all the difference." "Just telling the truth," Dr. Wilson replied. "That young woman deserves happiness after what she's endured. See that she gets it." The journey back to the ranch was tense despite their legal victory, both Benjamin and Olivia scanning the landscape constantly for signs of pursuit or ambush. But they arrived without incident to find everything peaceful, Esther having spent the day contentedly under Martha's doting care. "The judge ruled in our favor," Olivia announced as she gathered her daughter into her arms, pressing kisses to the infant's downy head. "Esther is legally ours, Benjamin's and mine." Martha beamed, wiping her hands on her apron. "As if there was ever any doubt. That man didn't deserve either of you." She bustled about, preparing a celebratory dinner while Olivia fed Esther and Benjamin conferred with Frank about increasing security around the ranch for the foreseeable future. That night, with Esther sleeping soundly in her cradle beside their bed, for Olivia had moved permanently into Benjamin's room after their first night together, husband and wife held each other close, the day's tensions finally easing in the safety of their shared intimacy. "It's really over," Olivia murmured against Benjamin's chest. "Legally, at least." Benjamin's hand stroked her hair, his touch gentle. "Legally, yes, but Edward's threats—" "I know," she sighed. "He won't give up easily." "We'll be ready," Benjamin assured her. "Frank's doubling the night watch, and I've sent word to some friends in the area to keep an eye out for trouble." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Try not to worry too much. Today was a victory worth celebrating." Olivia lifted her face to his, drawing him into a deeper kiss. "You're right," she whispered against his lips. "And I know exactly how I want to celebrate." Their lovemaking that night was different, more assured, more passionate, without the shadow of legal uncertainty that had hung over them before. As they moved together in the darkness, Olivia felt the last pieces of her fear and doubt falling away, replaced by a certainty that this man, this place, this life was exactly where she belonged. Later, as Benjamin slept beside her, Olivia lay awake watching the moonlight filter through the curtains, casting patterns across their tangled forms. From her cradle, Esther made a small sound in her sleep, a contented sigh that tugged at Olivia's heart. "We're safe now, little one," she whispered, though a nagging worry persisted at the edges of her consciousness. Edward's parting words in the courtroom echoed in her mind, "This isn't over," carrying a promise of vengeance that she couldn't entirely dismiss. But as Benjamin stirred beside her, instinctively drawing her closer in his sleep, Olivia pushed the dark thoughts away. They had overcome so much already, this small family forged in crisis and cemented by choice. Whatever challenges still lay ahead, they would face them together: the woman who had fled across the fields, the cowboy who had met her halfway, and the child who bound their hearts as one. The peaceful routine of ranch life gradually resumed in the weeks following the hearing, though Benjamin maintained the increased security measures: ranch hands always armed, night patrols around the property, and someone with Olivia and Esther at all times when he was working the more distant pastures. Edward had been notably absent from town since his courtroom defeat, having reportedly retreated to his ranch with orders that no visitors were welcome. "He's nursing his wounded pride," Frank observed one evening as he reported the day's activities to Benjamin. "Or planning something." "Hard to say which is worse." Benjamin nodded grimly. "Keep the men alert. I don't trust that silence." Despite the underlying tension, these were happy days for the Blackwell household. Esther grew stronger by the day, her tiny features increasingly resembling Olivia's, the same heart-shaped face and determined chin, though her eyes remained the deep blue of early infancy. "She has your smile," Benjamin remarked one afternoon as he watched Olivia cooing over their daughter. "Same little dimple right here." He touched the corner of Olivia's mouth gently. "She's not smiling yet," Olivia protested with a laugh. "That's just gas, according to Martha." "It's a smile," Benjamin insisted stubbornly, "and it's beautiful just like her mother's." Such moments, small, domestic, tender, filled their days, weaving a tapestry of shared life that strengthened the bond between them. Olivia blossomed under Benjamin's steady affection and respect, gradually leaving behind the fearful, defensive habits formed during her time with Edward. Benjamin, for his part, emerged from the emotional isolation he had maintained since Sarah's death, rediscovering the joy of partnership and family life. In mid-July, they celebrated Esther's 2-month birthday with a small gathering at the ranch doctor. Wilson and his wife, Judge Pearson, and a few neighboring ranchers with their families. It was Olivia's first time entertaining as Mrs. Blackwell, and though she had been nervous about the occasion, it proved to be a joyful success. "You've brought life back to this place, Mrs." Wilson told her warmly as they watched Benjamin proudly showing off Esther to the guests. "It's good to see Benjamin happy again. We were all worried about him after Sarah passed." Olivia smiled, though the mention of Benjamin's first wife still occasionally stirred an irrational pang of insecurity. "He's made me happy too, happier than I ever thought possible, especially after." Mrs. Wilson patted her hand understandingly. "The past is past, my dear. You've both been given a second chance. Treasure it." As the party wound down and their guests departed, Benjamin found Olivia on the porch, Esther sleeping in her arms. The setting sun bathed them in golden light, a tableau so beautiful it made his breath catch. "What are you thinking?" Olivia asked, noticing his intent gaze. Benjamin joined her on the porch swing, his arm sliding naturally around her shoulders. "I'm thinking I'm the luckiest man in Texas," he replied honestly. "Maybe in the whole country." She leaned her head against his shoulder, a contented sigh escaping her lips, even with all the complications. The extra guards, the legal battles, the constant looking over our shoulders. Even with all that, he confirmed, pressing a kiss to her hair. You and Esther are worth it, worth everything. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the swing moving gently beneath them. The evening air filled with the familiar sounds of the ranch settling for the night, cattle lowing in the distance, horses nickering in the barn, ranch hands talking and laughing as they finished their day's work. I love you, Olivia said suddenly, the words emerging with a certainty that surprised even her. They hadn't said it yet, though the feeling had been growing steadily between them. I know it hasn't been long and maybe it's too soon, but Benjamin silenced her with a kiss, tender but fervent. I love you too, he murmured against her lips. Have since I found you in that wheat field, I think, though I was too stubborn to admit it even to myself. The confession, long felt but finally voiced, wrapped around them like a warm embrace. For a moment, all was perfect in their world, a family united by choice and love, the future stretching before them full of promise. The crack of a rifle shot shattered the peaceful moment. Benjamin reacted instantly, shoving Olivia and Esther down onto the porch floor and covering them with his body. Stay down, he ordered, his hand already drawing his revolver. Another shot splintered the wood of the porch railing inches from where they had been sitting. From the bunkhouse and barn, shouts of alarm rose as the ranch hands responded to the attack. Inside, Benjamin directed, helping Olivia to her feet while maintaining his protective stance. Stay away from the windows. They barely made it through the door when a third shot hit the house, the bullet embedding itself in the doorframe. Inside, they found Martha already moving with surprising speed for her bulk, closing shutters and extinguishing lamps to make the occupants less visible to whoever was firing from the darkness. Is anyone hit? She demanded, her practical nature asserting itself despite the danger. We're fine, Benjamin replied tersely, peering carefully around the edge of a window. Can't see where the shots are coming from. Probably the ridge to the east, good vantage point. Esther, startled awake by the commotion, began to wail. Olivia rocked her desperately, trying to soothe the infant while her own heart pounded with terror. Edward, she whispered. Benjamin's grim nod confirmed her fear. Has to be. No one else has reason to target us. Frank appeared at the kitchen door, rifle in hand. Boss, the boys are taking positions around the house. Whoever's shooting seems to be alone based on the timing of the shots. One man, one rifle, Benjamin agreed, but he's got the high ground and cover of darkness. He made a quick decision. Frank, I need you to stay here with Olivia and Esther. Martha too. I'm going to circle around with the men, try to flush him out. Benjamin, no, Olivia protested, clutching his arm. He's trying to draw you out, that's what he wants. And I can't just sit here waiting for him to get lucky with a shot through a window, Benjamin countered, though his expression softened as he looked at her frightened face. I'll be careful, I promise, but this ends tonight, one way or another. He kissed her quickly, then pressed his lips to Esther's forehead before she could argue further. With a nod to Frank, he slipped out the back door, revolver in one hand, rifle in the other. The minutes that followed were among the longest of Olivia's life. She sat in the center of the kitchen, away from any windows, holding Esther close and singing softly to keep the baby calm. Martha busied herself loading Benjamin's spare shotgun, her face set in determined lines, while Frank positioned himself near the back door, occasionally reporting what little he could see or hear of the action outside. They're moving toward the ridge, he murmured at one point. Benjamin's taken Joe and Miguel with him. The others are keeping watch on the house. More gunshots echoed in the distance, 3 in rapid succession, then silence. Olivia's breath caught in her throat, her arms tightening around Esther. "That came from the ridge," Frank observed, his weathered face revealing nothing of his own concern. The silence stretched, unbearable in its uncertainty. Was Benjamin wounded? Killed? Had Edward escaped, only to return another day with more men, better weapons, a more elaborate plan for revenge? Then, just as Olivia felt she might scream from the tension, the sound of approaching horses reached them. Frank moved to the window, peering cautiously through a gap in the shutters. "It's Benjamin," he announced with palpable relief. "And the boys. They've got someone with them, looks like they're bringing him in." Olivia rose on shaky legs, Esther still clutched to her chest. "Edward," Frank nodded grimly. "Appears so. He slumped over his saddle, can't tell if he's wounded or just tied there." Minutes later, the back door opened to admit Benjamin, his face streaked with dirt and what might have been blood, his expression a complex mixture of relief, anger, and something darker that Olivia couldn't quite name. "You're hurt," she gasped, noticing a tear in his shirt sleeve where a bullet had grazed his arm. "It's nothing," he dismissed, though he allowed Martha to examine the wound. "Just a scratch." His eyes never left Olivia's face. "Are you all right, both of you?" She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The reality of how close they had come to losing everything, to losing him, crashed over her in a wave that left her trembling. "Edward," she managed finally. Benjamin's expression hardened. "Alive. Wounded, took a bullet in the shoulder when he tried to draw on us. Joe and Miguel are taking him to town, straight to the jail. Judge Pearson will be notified tonight. He'll face charges this time," Frank added with grim satisfaction. "Attempted murder at the very least. Not even his connections can get him out of this." The news should have brought relief, but Olivia found herself sinking into a chair, suddenly overwhelmed by the events of the night. Benjamin was at her side instantly, his good arm around her shoulders, his voice gentle in her ear. "It's over, Olivia. Really over this time. He won't hurt you or Esther ever again." She looked up at him, this man who had risked his life to protect his family, who had met violence not with blind rage but with measured courage. "Promise me," she whispered. "Promise me you'll never take such risks again. I can't lose you, Benjamin. We can't lose you." His eyes softened as he looked from her to Esther, still clutched protectively in her arms. "I promise," he said solemnly. "No more heroics. From now on, we focus on living, not just surviving." In the days that followed, news from town confirmed what Benjamin had predicted. Edward Thornwood was charged with attempted murder and held without bail pending trial. Several of his former friends and business associates, dismayed by his descent into violent obsession, came forward with accounts of his increasingly erratic behavior and threats against the Blackwells. Even his ranch hands testified to his deteriorating mental state in the weeks following the custody hearing. "He'll likely spend years in prison," Judge Pearson informed them when he visited the ranch to take their official statements. "Possibly the rest of his life, depending on how the trial goes. Either way, he won't trouble your family again." Family. The word resonated with Olivia as she watched Benjamin thank the judge, his arm still bandaged but healing well. They had become a family through the strangest of circumstances, a desperate escape, a chance encounter, a marriage of convenience that had blossomed into deep and genuine love. What had begun as Benjamin's protective impulse toward a pregnant woman in distress had transformed into a bond stronger than any Olivia had ever known. As summer gave way to fall, and fall to the crisp beginnings of winter, life at the Blackwell Ranch settled into a rhythm of ordinary joys and challenges. Esther grew from a fragile, premature infant into a robust, curious baby with her mother's dimpled smile and her stepfather's observant nature. Benjamin expanded the cattle operation, purchasing an adjacent parcel of land that increased their grazing area significantly. Olivia, growing more confident in her role as a rancher's wife and mother, began to contribute her own ideas to the running of the household and even some aspects of the ranch business, her practical intelligence earning respect from Benjamin and the hands alike. Edward Thornwood's trial in October resulted in a 20-year sentence, effectively removing any lingering threat to their happiness. With that shadow finally lifted, Benjamin and Olivia began to talk about the future, about more children to join Esther, about improvements to the ranch house, about the legacy they hoped to build together. On Christmas Eve, 6 months after that fateful day when Olivia had fled across the wheat fields with nothing but fear and desperate hope to sustain her, the Blackwell family gathered in their cozy parlor. A fire crackled in the hearth, its warm light illuminating the simple decorations Martha had insisted on: pine boughs and red ribbons, candles in the windows, small gifts wrapped in brown paper and string beneath a modest tree cut from their own land. Esther, now 7 months old and recently mastering the art of sitting up unassisted, babbled happily on a quilt spread before the fire, reaching for the colorful wooden toys Benjamin had carved for her. Olivia watched from her place on the sofa, contentment washing over her at the domestic scene. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Blackwell," Benjamin said as he joined her, passing a cup of Martha's spiced cider into her hands. Olivia smiled, leaning against his solid warmth. "I was just thinking about how much has changed in half a year. Last Christmas, I was trapped in a nightmare with Edward, dreading the baby I carried because of the complications it would bring to an already unbearable situation." She glanced at Esther, who was now gumming one of her wooden blocks enthusiastically. "Now look at us." Benjamin followed her gaze, his expression softening as he watched his adopted daughter. "I remember the exact moment I saw you running through Miller's wheat," he said quietly. "You looked so desperate, so determined, even though you were clearly exhausted. I knew then that you were someone extraordinary, though I had no idea how completely you would change my life." "Our lives changed each other," Olivia corrected gently, setting aside her cider to take his hand. "That's what love does, I think. The real kind, anyway." He squeezed her hand, then reached into his pocket with his free one. "I have something for you. Was going to wait until morning, but—" He produced a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "Merry Christmas, Olivia." Curious, she unwrapped the gift to find a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. When she opened it, she gasped softly. On one side was a tiny photograph of Esther, on the other, a lock of dark hair that could only be Benjamin's. "It's beautiful," she whispered, tears pricking at her eyes. Benjamin took the locket from her hands and carefully fastened it around her neck. "I wanted you to have a reminder, always close to your heart, of the family we've built, the family we chose." Olivia touched the locket reverently, then drew Benjamin into a kiss that conveyed everything words could not: her gratitude, her joy, her love. When they parted, both slightly breathless, she smiled up at him with shining eyes. "I have a gift for you too," she said, her voice suddenly shy. "Though it's not something I could wrap." Benjamin raised an eyebrow, waiting. "Dr. Wilson confirmed it yesterday," Olivia continued, taking his hand and placing it gently over her still flat stomach. "We're having a baby, our baby, due in early summer." For a moment Benjamin seemed frozen, his expression one of stunned disbelief. Then joy broke across his features like sunrise, radiant and transformative. He gathered Olivia into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. A baby, he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. Our baby. From her place on the quilt, Esther let out a delighted squeal, as if sensing the happiness surrounding her. Benjamin reached down to lift her, bringing her into their embrace to complete the family circle. Best Christmas gift ever, he declared, pressing kisses first to Olivia's lips, then to Esther's forehead. Thank you for running across those fields, Olivia Blackwell. Thank you for letting me find you. Olivia leaned into his embrace, surrounded by the love and security she had once thought forever beyond her reach. Thank you for meeting me halfway, she whispered, and for never letting go. Outside, the Texas winter night wrapped around their ranch house like a protective blanket. Stars scattered across the vast sky like promises waiting to be fulfilled. Inside, the fire crackled on the hearth, casting its warm glow over the family that fate, courage, and love had brought together: the woman who had fled across the fields, the cowboy who had met her halfway, and the children, both present and future, who were the living testament to their extraordinary journey. And in that moment, in that place, their happiness was complete.